Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So, we're continuing a series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and we're going to be doing some more Sega Saturn core testing today, because we have new cores, we have improved audio, we have improved performance in some games as well. So we're going to be retesting some things that we've recently retested to show you the improvements, and some games we haven't looked at in a little bit. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, down below hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But let's get right into the Sega Saturn testing, because we got a lot of games to talk about this week. The first one, and one of the most popular games on the Sega Saturn, is going to be Virtua Fighter 2. This would work, but it would have some sound issues, and would also have some slowdown issues in previous cores. We're just playing around with the FMV here, because I absolutely love how it shows the evolution of the graphics in the game in real time as it fades from one model to the other. But it is amazing to see these things improve in real time. SRG 320 has been updating this core at least once a week, if not twice, and a lot of those improvements have been super fundamental to the performance of some of Sega Saturn's best games. Last time we showed you this game, there was still the propensity for it to slow down every once in a while, and that seems to be cleaned up. The audio now completely works, there's no clipping of the channels, and there's no other issues in there. And as I always mention, do remember this runs in interlace mode, so if you see the interlacing lines on the screen, that has nothing to do with the performance of the core, and just everything about how interlacing video comes over into a capture card. If you're playing this on a PVM or a CRT television, you wouldn't see it whatsoever. And considering the fact that Virtua Fighter 2 is one of the most famous Sega Saturn games out there, and just such an incredible fighting game, having it working in this current state on MiSTer FPGA on the Saturn core is awesome. I can't tell any difference between this and real hardware outside of being able to see the interlacing lines obviously in the capture, and that is the nice thing. This core is shaping up to be so good in 2024, and the improvements to Virtua Fighter are definitely bringing it more in line with real hardware. I do think that if you put the Sega Saturn in a black box and the MiSTer FPGA in a black box, just handed me controllers, if they were on a PVM, I might have difficulty telling you which one was real hardware and which one was Sega Saturn, and the core continues to impress me. There's more games that I could say that. But again, the audio fixes and the lack of slowdown here are what really matter. Maybe like a month and a half ago we showed this game, and sometimes when you would try to get in close to your enemy, it would seem like the core would artificially slow down in places that the actual hardware would not. Seems maybe it was tied to some of the fixes in Pandemonium that we showed a few videos ago, where that game finally started running at full speed. But from the controls to the performance to the visuals to the audio, this is just basically replicating real Sega Saturn hardware here. And big thanks to Andy D for helping with some of the captures this week as well. Now moving over to Afterburner, this is another game that has seen huge improvements on the most recent cores. It used to be that this game would freeze a lot, and it would also have either no audio or audio for like 5 or 6 seconds until the audio would drop out and it would be completely missing from the game. Now the good thing is today that is completely not the case. You're going to get music, you're going to get sound effects, you're going to get the full Afterburner experience, and this is an absolutely incredible port over to the Sega Saturn. And it also shows just how good the graphics are doing on VDP1 and VDP2, because this is the type of thing that the Saturn really excels at when it comes to 2D. That infinite plane, the rotation and scaling of sprites, this is the type of stuff that the Sega Saturn was originally designed for before 3D was not added in later, but kind of more brought to the forefront of what the next generation of hardware was going to be all about. This is smooth, it's fluid, the controls are there, all the graphics look correct. Again, I cannot tell anything in this footage that makes me think it wouldn't be running on real Sega Saturn hardware if I didn't know where the capture came from. But if you see anything at all, leave me a comment down below, because it takes a lot of eyes to spot every single issue, and I only have the 2 of them. But this is just such a quintessentially classic Sega arcade game, and I did have this back in the day on Sega Saturn as well. I remember loving this game, playing it in arcades, and of course I wanted a near to perfect arcade experience at home. And that's what you're getting here on the current MiSTer FPGA core, and this has been a fun one to test. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't, sometimes it would have some audio, sometimes it would have none. But go ahead and listen to the quality of the audio now. I think you're going to be very happily impressed. The music, the sound effects, the explosions, everything is there. Nothing's clipping any channels, nothing is dropping out, and that is something we really couldn't say about Afterburner on any previous cores that we have tested it on. You would always have a freezing issue, you would have some audio issues. Even the track screen here, everything looks exactly like it should, and that is just awesome to see. And again, if you haven't played Afterburner in a long time, this is the type of game that you can sit down with your MiSTer FPGA and the current Sega Saturn core and play today. And a reminder again, because people always seem to be tripped up by this, the core and update all is not the most recent core. You need to go over to MiSTer FPGA and go into the Unstables Nightly channel. Now moving over to Powerslave, another one of those classic Sega Saturn games. It is working incredibly well. It still has some issues with shading, but otherwise once that comes in, this would seem to be another perfect game. But last time we talked about this, the audio definitely popped and did some weird things in the background. Some of the explosions, some of the sound effects would basically either play the wrong thing or would be so hot in the volume that it would basically make you want to take your headphones off if you were wearing them. The nice part is, as of the current cores, again, that sound problem has been completely patched out, and I will let you listen to it in just a moment. But this is another game that gets tested pretty much every single core because there were still known issues with it, and now most of those have been completely buttoned up. The performance on this is the same frame rate that you're going to get on real Sega Saturn hardware. The control is incredible, and outside of that kind of shading, you're not getting anything else here that wouldn't be looking like real hardware. Those explosions work well, and even though I'm not going to let you listen to the sound effect, it just sounds like boom boom boom. It didn't clip out the audio channels, and that's what really matters in these sort of things. It's not just getting the right audio at the right time, it's making sure it's at the right balance and not getting so loud that it's going to clip the channels and basically distort itself. And if you've never played Powerslave before, I say this every single test, this is now your reminder to do so. This is one of the best first-person shooters that I feel like most people have never heard of before or played. So if you've never played Powerslave, or if you maybe played a level and decided not to go back to it, let this be a reminder that you should definitely play the game however you can, and MiSTer FPGA is a decent way to do it. And I promise I'd let you listen to the improved audio, so go ahead and listen for like 30 seconds or so, but come back because I got some more games that are a lot better on the current core. So much more improved than the last time we tested this game, and if you're wondering why the sound effects are a little bit louder than the music, that's how the game plays on a stock Sega Saturn as well without changing any of the menu options. I did check on my original hardware, and that's just how it is. Now moving over to another game that's gotten a lot of sound improvements and a game that people have been asking me to retest is going to be Radiant Silvergun. This is definitely one of those games that does not hold your hand. It is incredibly difficult, it is going to kill you a bunch, and you're going to have an absolute ton of fun learning the mechanics and getting further in the game. And this is the type of game, if you actually wanted to buy a real copy on the Sega Saturn, you better damn well bring your wallet because they are not giving this thing away. And the good thing is here on the current core, the performance is improved and the sound is much better because this is one of those games in previous cores, and this is a joke, not a judgment about the core whatsoever. It would make sounds that sounded like you had a dozen cats in a bag and you were hitting it with a piñata stick. It just made some noises that definitely were never in the game, and that was just down to an incomplete implementation in FPGA and a little bit of bugs. SRG320 has done an incredible job with this core, and I never want anyone to think that when I call out an issue, it is any way a judgment. Every once in a while I see comments, people think that that's what I'm trying to say. It couldn't be any further from the truth. This is just an improved experience all across the board. You can now just sit down and play this game, enjoy it like it was intended to, without spending half your rent payment on trying to buy a copy for your Sega Saturn. But again, it is just hard as nails difficult, so get used to that. But as you look around the screen, you can see all of the different effects that VDP1 and VDP are doing. You have these pseudo transparencies, you have so many different bullets at one time coming towards you, you have all of the different background layers, the parallax scrolling, your character sprite, everything in the projectile sprites, and it's just working here. I don't see anything that doesn't look like Radiant Silvergun to me. If you see anything you don't like, leave me a comment down below. And you'll see here as all of those different projectiles come towards us, the engine holds up, the core holds up, and everything just functions. And that's what we look for when we look for a game that's just just working. You get to play, you get to have fun, you don't notice anything off because there isn't anything off about it. So if you've never played this game before, check it out on the current core. I believe all the freezing in later levels have been patched up as well, but honestly, getting that far into this game takes a lot of practice. It would probably take like 3 or 4 hours to see the end of the game if you're not practiced very well, and you only get so many credits before you have to start the game over again. But honestly, this is probably one of the most improved games in this testing set, because the last time we looked at it, the audio was something that you just wanted to hit mute on and not listen to. Now it just seems to be working as you would expect it to, and that is always a fun time to see. Now let's move on to one more game, the quote-unquote perfect game for this video, and it's going to be Darkstalkers. This is another one of those quintessential Capcom fighting games that absolutely everyone who's ever played has fallen in love with. And of course we have this on the arcade side from Hotego on the CPS2 core, but the Sega Saturn version is no slouch whatsoever and is currently working perfectly in my opinion here today with Vampire Savior. When you get to the game, all of the controls are perfect, there's no latency, all of the graphics are drawing correctly, everything in the sound effects and music department is just working. I would have absolutely no idea I wasn't playing real Sega Saturn hardware if you threw this thing onto a CRT or PVM and just handed me a controller. I would not be able to distinguish the two, and that's absolutely an amazing experience to have. And again, just one of the best Sega Saturn games of all time. It's stylish, it's fun, the fighting game engine and mechanics are deep but still easy enough to pick up and play, and when you play it on MiSTer FPGA, it is 100% doing the same thing in my opinion as real hardware would do. And it's another game with the current core that would have what I would consider perfect audio as well, so go ahead and listen just for like 25 seconds this time and I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about the current core, but enjoy because it's good. Sounds good to my ears, and I think it's going to sound good to your ears as well, but if you hear anything you don't like, leave me a comment down below, but I'm not really expecting much on that front. But the great thing about Vampire Savior here is it's just the type of game on the current core that you can sit down, play, and enjoy. You can see the credits scroll, you can play with friends, you can do whatever you want, you can basically just treat the MiSTer FPGA like it's a real Sega Saturn at that point in time, because there's no freezing, there's no audio issues, there's no visual glitches. It is just playing a Sega Saturn game on a recreation of Sega Saturn hardware, and that is the goal for all of these things after all, for you not to really be able to tell if you're playing on real hardware or if you're playing on MiSTer FPGA. So at least for this one game in this video here today, I would say it is 1-to-1 with original hardware, and pretty much nobody would be able to tell the difference if I didn't tell you the difference in a video, and that's just that you're watching MiSTer FPGA. But that's the current slate of tests on the current core. If you have any requests, leave them down below. I try to get to each and every one of them, but if I don't get to yours in a few weeks, just remind me, because I do get way more requests than I can ever remember. I do try to write them down though. But if you want to play the current core, just go over to MiSTer FPGA, go over to the Unstable Nightly's channel, and pick the most recent Sega Saturn core, and you can be having the same fun yourself. Sure to that we're done. Sega Saturn gets better every week, and I'll see you guys next time for more Saturn. Bye bye.